Hello, everybody. So, reflection papers, all right? Whether you have written reflection papers before or if this is your first time, this presentation is here to refresh key skills and to clarify what it is that I'm looking for in grading this assignment. So, I'm going to share my screen with you. So, just bear with me for a second here. Um, and here we go. There we are. And let's just put this on to presenter view for you. Okay, there we are. Okay, I call this PowerPoint how to write a darn good reflection paper. Reflection papers are they're really about thinking on purpose. It's about taking experience and turning it into insight and then some. Okay, so let's get started. What is a reflection paper? And I mean, really. Okay, well, I can tell you what it isn't. A reflection paper isn't a diary entry, and it isn't a play-by-play of events. At its core, reflection is about making sense of an experience, analyzing it, right? The analytical part of it, thinking about what happened, how you responded, what it meant, and why it matters now. So, reflection turns experience into insight and then insight into understanding. And, folks, that is the lens that I want you to bring to this assignment. All right. So, let's talk about some ways to make sure that our reflection papers are successful. So, number one, probably the most important too, is to choose a topic that you are genuinely passionate about, something that you find really interesting, all right? Or something that you believe is like genuinely important. So reflection only works when there's something at stake, okay? Now, second, you want to write in the first person. There should be, you should be using I or me, okay, throughout the paper. That is actually expected in reflective writing. Number three, avoid colloquial expressions or slang. Now, even though this is a reflective paper, it's still an academic paper, all right? And all of the conventions that go along with it have to be a part of that paper. And then number four, reflection goes deep, all right? Critical reflection involves a deep, in-depth analysis and requires engaging with additional resources, sources, and so on, and also differing viewpoints. All right. And this is where your critical thinking skills really develop. Okay. Finally, and this is important too, you want to avoid too much description. A play-by-play of everything that happened is not necessary. And again, what matters more is the topic itself and how you felt, thought, and responded. So this brings us to developing a central question, which is pausing, worth pausing on, because developing your central question becomes incredibly important going forward. I actually even get people sometimes look at me like this is the first time that they've ever heard it. So I'm going to go into some detail here just to make sure that you understand it and understand the value of it, okay, going forward and shaping this essay and any essay actually. So let's talk about inquiry though for a minute. Inquiry is about the search for meaning and not just finding the answer to a simple question. It's more of putting together a puzzle, all right? And it comes from asking yourself things like, what feels complicated about this idea? Like, where do I feel torn? Where do I feel uncertain? What do I want to understand better? And that tension is what you turn into your central question. And that question becomes the engine, right? The engine, the central question basically of your paper. So let's just unpack this slide a little bit here, which is actually an example of an essay that I would really, really like to write. It's a topic that I'm passionate about, and really, I really want to learn more about it. Okay. So let's start with my theme: navigating the promise and peril of AI. Simple theme, right? Something that I'm deeply concerned about. I think about it all the time. So then the next thing I need to do is look for the tension. What is it about that topic that feels complicated, right? Where do I feel torn or unsure? What do I want to understand better? And hey, like, this is what I call it sometimes. What is that itch that you just can't scratch? That is the tension. So here's the thought that I came up with here is that we all want the benefits of AI, but we also fear losing the qualities that make us human, right? That is the question. That is the thoughts. And so if I want to turn that thought into a good central question, I need to make sure that it's specific. I need to make sure that it's open-ended. I need to make sure that it's focused on inquiry, right? I also want to make sure that it's not, going to just give me a yes or no answer. So the example that I came up with here, I took the theme plus that tension, right, and presented it as one central question, which is this: how can we prevent the peril of AI, loss of empathy, and ethical reasoning from overshadowing its promise? All right. Once I have that sorted out, then I just want to move on to exploring why that central question works. And so let's look at it here. I saw a strong central question basically focuses your thinking. It highlights the core tension that you're exploring and encourages inquiry rather than description. It also sets you up to move naturally toward a thesis. So if your paper ever feels unfocused, it's usually because the central question isn't doing enough work yet. So let's just take a look at this slide to see why this central question works. Okay, here we go. How can we prevent the peril of AI, loss of empathy, and ethical reasoning from overshadowing its promise? Well, first of all, it asks only one clear question, okay? It focuses on the core ethical tension, right? It demands inquiry and meaning. So, right, it promotes deeper ethical analysis, moral guidance, and meaningful insight. It's an open-ended inquiry, right? It demands interpretation and exploration, not just a yes or no answer. It encourages reflection on human impact and responsibility, prompts consideration of how AI affects people's lived experiences, values, and so on. And this is the part that you will probably love, okay? If you've ever written a paper that wanders, maybe feels a little unorganized, gets into scope creep, and honestly, who hasn't? Like I said, you are going to love this because developing a strong central question naturally leads to a thesis, okay? Guides you towards a clear position on how to, whatever it is that what you're trying to argue. Okay. Now, once you are able to actually come up with a great central question, you want to convert that into a thesis, all right? A topic on its own is broad and neutral. A thesis, on the other hand, just clarifies the tension that you feel about that idea. All right. I think we covered that quite well. So where my students tend to struggle is right around this point. So let's just slow down a little bit and we're going to just see how my central question works. All right. So that question is, how can we prevent the peril of AI, loss of empathy, and ethical reasoning from overshadowing its promise? Well, we want to move basically from topic to stance here. So the topic would be AI can be helpful, but also harmful, which is cool. That's true, right? That's kind of the premise of all of this. But by taking a stance, you actually would say something like, we must, okay? We must protect human judgment and autonomy so AI doesn't begin making decisions for us, all right? So all of a sudden now I've got something that's an argument, something that I need to prove. Next, you have to add the because, the why, and showing why it matters, okay? So here's what we came up with, because, and that's a tip for you too, folks, is write the word because when you're developing your thesis. Because allowing AI and not people to shape judgment and behavior undermines human agency, all right? And then once you've got those two things together, you've got something that actually is going to give direction to the rest of your paper, all right? That thesis that you come up with should point towards the key ideas that your essay will explore, basically your subtopics. So what do we have here? We have autonomy, that would be one. Moral responsibility, another. Human agency. And boy, if you are writing a 2,000 to 2,500 word paper, 3 subtopics are plenty to give you enough ability to get deep into the assignment, all right? All righty. So next, what we want to do is we want to do a little check on whether or not a thesis works, whether it's effective. So let's just take a peek at the one that I came up with, and we'll just see whether or not it fits the criteria. And honestly, this is probably one of the most important checkpoints of this entire deck. So let's look at the thesis. All right. We must protect human judgment and autonomy when using AI because allowing AI rather than people to shape decision-making undermines human agency, weakens moral responsibility, and risks eroding personal autonomy. All right. So whenever you actually do write a thesis, what I want you to do from now on is run it through 3 questions. The first one, does it take a stance? And here, yeah, it takes a stance. We must protect human judgment and autonomy when using AI, right? It's about how I, as the writer, feels about the topic instead of just naming it, all right? If your statement is neutral, it's probably not a thesis yet, okay? So second, is there a clear why element, the who, the because part of it? And the answer is here, yes. In this thesis, the stakes are visible. There's a risk here. It's undermining human agency, moral responsibility, and autonomy. And the third thing, does it create a built-in structure? And yes, again, it sets up the paper's key sections. And these again are human agency, moral responsibility, and autonomy. Okay? This thesis that we've built here is a natural roadmap that points towards the key ideas that I would be exploring in this essay, basically the backbone of the essay. Now, if you can answer yes to all 3 of these, all right, that means that your thesis is doing the work. All right. One more thing that I do want to mention about a thesis, though, as well, is that the thesis should appear early, ideally in the first paragraph. To do otherwise is often referred to as burying the lead, okay? And you may have already heard this term as it pertains to news writing, but it's basically the same concept here. Get your thesis in early. Don't make the reader, please, don't make the reader hunt for your position, all right? Okay, and as I said, this actually, once you've got a thesis like that, it really helps you build an outline, okay? All righty. It just basically guides you to writing the outline by itself once you have all of this. So let's take a look and see. We've got our central question, which helped us build our thesis. And once we have that, we also had our three subtopics, right? The one was autonomy, AI systems, and human decision making, and decision fatigue, and all of that. Moral responsibility, including things like, who's responsible when AI makes a decision, like basically who could you sue or whatever. And then the third one would be human agency, how AI shapes behavior and habits, and so on. All right. Your thesis leads to those topics, like I said, gives you that structure that I was talking about. All right. And when a reflection is well structured, it feels purposeful rather than meandering. Okay. Now let's just talk about synthesizing a conclusion. And I'm going to be honest here, folks. I really don't like being negative, but I have to be honest. I read a lot of unsatisfying conclusions, but that's not going to happen here, right? Because I'm going to teach you how to write an amazing conclusion. Okay, let's just take a look at the conclusion that I came up with. All right, AI doesn't erase our responsibility, it amplifies it. As these systems take on more cognitive tasks, we must decide which roles that we can confidently delegate and which must remain unmistakably human. The promise of AI is real efficiency, insight, and possibility. But so is the peril, the quiet erosion of judgment, agency, and moral responsibility if we stop thinking for ourselves. This reflection reminds us that the future of AI will be shaped not only by engineers and algorithms, but by us all in the choices that we make, the boundaries we set, and the values that we refuse to surrender. The challenge moving forward is simple but significant: to let AI support our humanity, not replace it. Okay? So, a strong conclusion circles back to the thesis, all right? It draws a clear and meaningful insight from the reflection and often challenges you and the reader to think beyond the page. A strong, satisfying conclusion is hands down, folks, hands down, what differentiates a piece of good writing from an outstanding one. In other words, it answers the question, so what? And then if you have done it really well, it also answers the question, what's next? Okay. Alrighty. I hope that you found that this was helpful for you. In closing, as you work through your reflection paper, remember this isn't about recounting events. It's about showing how you've made meaning of experience and how that meaning shapes your thinking going forward. And as you go forward, use the slides as a guide, all right? Return to them as needed and keep that thesis up front and center, right at the top. Early, clear, and purposeful. Okay, again, you are not just reflecting on where you've been, you're clarifying where you're going to go next. Okay, so again, I hope you found this helpful. And of course, folks, please do not hesitate to reach out if you have any further questions. Okay, best wishes, and I mean it. Okay, bye-bye for now.